Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Doing Well, the Wellbeing Science Insights Podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We're champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week, we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I'm your host, Lu Ngo, coming to your ears from Naarm, Melbourne, Australia. Let's learn together.
What if the secret to a fulfilling workday isn't the size of your paycheck or the person in the break room, but the simple everyday moments you share with your colleagues? Hello and welcome back to the show. Today we're investigating social well-being, how social well-being affects not just our work productivity, but also our overall well-being. And joining us today is award-winning psychologist Ryan C. Warner, a globally recognized speaker, accomplished scholar, and military veteran to boot. With a steadfast focus on amplifying inclusion and mental wellness in the workspace, Ryan propels organizational performance to unparalleled heights. So welcome to the show today, Ryan.
I'm so honored to be here and really excited. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. I'm glad to hear more as to what you have to say. But before that, tell us a bit about your background. It seems like you've accomplished so much in your lifetime. I'm curious as to what compelled you to pursue organizational psychology.
So it's interesting you asked that question because it was my birthday this past Sunday. And every birthday, I just pause and reflect and identify, how did I get to where I am now? And also, where do I want to continue to go for the future? And just reflecting on my journey, I never thought in a million years that I'll be in this point. In high school, I really didn't even know what a psychologist was or consulting, but I knew I was really passionate about health and wellness. In high school, I played every sport you could imagine: basketball, football. I ran cross country and track. And at first, I thought I wanted to be a physical therapist because I was passionate about athletics. And I thought that'd be a great way to work with athletes to help them rehabilitate physically. So I was able to get into my dream school, the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, which is a large uh, Big Ten university, 40,000 plus students who go to the school. And it wasn't too far from my hometown in the Chicagoland area. So it was a great fit for me. Ultimately, I majored in community health with a focus in rehabilitation. And during that time, I was able to be a physical therapist technician. So I was able to work under the supervision of a physical therapist. And when I worked with athletes and I worked with students who experienced various physical injuries, I would help them rehabilitate, and go through various stretches and exercises. In doing that, I listened to their concerns and their challenges. They would tell me the emotional difficulties that they are going through. They were talking about going through depression due to the fact that they have difficulty walking and they're not able to perform well in the sports that they play anymore. They would talk about how they impact their social relationships. And I would listen to them. I would empathize with them. And in turn, I remember when they finished treatment, they would say, "Hey, Ryan, I really appreciate you helping me rehabilitate physically. But I even more appreciate the fact that you just listened, the fact that you were empathetic, the fact that you were able to support me emotionally." And right then and there, a light bulb went off. And I was like, hey, maybe I should be a psychologist. So after my undergrad experience, I went directly to my master's and received a master's degree in rehabilitation psychology. And after that, I then continued directly after my master's to receive a PhD in counseling psychology. And I started my career within the military because I wanted to be a leader. I wanted to have a strong foundation for the beginning of my career and be propelled into a leadership role right away. So I graduated with my PhD at the age of 27 years old. And once I graduated, I was promoted to director of psychological health. So I was in charge of the psychological well-being of over 20,000 military service members and their families. And that pushed me to be a leader. It pushed me to think outside the box. Fast forward, I started a business part-time. And at first it was just a speaking business. And then it went into consulting, strategic planning, executive coaching. I then discharged from the military in 2022, did 4 years active duty, and then 2 years National Guard after that. And then totally out of the military now, working full time in my business, RC Warner Consulting, in which we consult with organizations across the globe to boost their organizational performance. So that's my story, and that's how I got to where I am now.
Wow, thanks for sharing that. That's such a, I don't have the words for it, but that sounds like such a robust journey. And, it sounds like you've had a lot of different little mini journeys along the way as well. And I'm really excited to talk about this because I'm such a firm believer that like the community that you have at work can really, can really help you rise above anything, any challenge that you face. That being said, I know that it's such a struggle sometimes to like, if especially if you're in a new workplace, to like force a friendship. Sometimes you know that you've got to build the community or to build some relationships there, but sometimes it feels just not genuine or not authentic, and it can feel forced, or you can feel like because you have a goal in mind to like forge that friendship, that maybe it feels like you're being disingenuous, you have an ulterior motive. But before we get into all of that and how to cultivate positive interactions at work, I would love to know what are some common misconceptions that you've come across about social well-being in the workplace.
So the first thing that I've seen in my work as a both clinical psychologist and consultant psychologist is that a lot of individuals feel that social well-being is related to being liked at work, right? Who doesn't want to be liked, right? Who doesn't want to receive that validation and affirmation that they're on the right page, that they're a great coworker, and they're doing the right thing? But instead, social well-being is more about feeling respected, more about feeling connected and psychologically safe when interacting with others within the workplace. So that's a little bit different than just being liked. So that's the common misconception that I just want to demystify about social well-being.
Yeah, well, that's a great preface for our topic for today. But before we go further into detail, I would love to get to know you a little bit better. So, this is Have You Met Ryan? This is going to be a rapid fire style icebreaker. So, please answer in a few words if possible. I'll say a word and just answer whatever comes to mind. Book,
Atomic Habits,
movie,
Wolf of Wall Street,
podcasts,
Earn at Your Leisure,
role model,
my mom,
a course or a class that you've taken that has stuck with you to this day.
neuroscience.
And what is the most important lesson that you've learned from all of these?
The most important lesson that I've learned is trust your vision, doubt your fear.
Wise words, my friends. Well, thank you for sharing all of that. I've had a pleasure of getting to know you a bit better. Now let's move on to the interview. And for starters, I would love to get your perspective or definition of a few of the key terms that might reappear several times during this episode. First and foremost, this is the Wellbeing Podcast. So how would you define well-being?
So, well-being is a holistic state where we feel healthy, we feel secure, we feel capable, not just mentally, but also emotionally and physically and socially within our environment. So that's how I view well-being. Well-being can be defined a number of different ways, but I think that's a multifaceted way to look at this particular definition.
And specifically when it comes to social well-being in the workplace, what is your definition of that?
Yeah, so social well-being is feeling connected, feeling respected, feeling psychologically safe within the workplace. So there's intrapersonal well-being, well-being within myself, okay? And there's interpersonal, right? My well-being when I interact with others socially.
Yeah. And what is the importance of social well-being at work?
Well, social well-being is a significant part of our well-being, right? Like we're as human beings, we're naturally social beings. From just the earliest of times, we had to come together to achieve an outcome, to achieve a goal, to achieve a mission. And we also need to take that perspective within the workplace. When you think about COVID, right, and everything that happened there, we naturally began to be isolated. And we saw the negative impacts that it had just on our overall well being, right? Maybe we didn't work out or engage in physical activity as much. Maybe we felt isolated and lonely, right? And then we noticed that mental health challenges began to exacerbate just looking at the data, right? So, yeah, we definitely need social well being in all parts of our lives so that we can thrive.
Yeah, tell us more about the data. What has the research suggested about the impact of workplace relationships and our social well-being at work on our workplace performance, our work engagement, or even just general physical health?
Yes. So the American Psychological Association came out with a survey data a couple years ago, and it showed that around 70% of all employees across, this was a US based study, across US, were stressed out. They were burnt out at work. Okay. That is significant. Okay. 70% of individuals feeling overwhelmed and burned out within the workplace. So the data also shows that to buffer against that distress, you have to have those connections within the workplace. You have to feel safe and feel that you can be vulnerable at work. And in turn, you're going to feel more included. You're going to feel that you belong and you're going to be more engaged as well. So that is how we can use social well-being to ultimately, buffer against, just natural stress that comes with work.
Yeah. And simply put, how would you describe the relationship then between social well-being at work and our overall well-being?
So think about how much time do we spend at work, within our lives as adults. Okay. A significant part of our life is spent at work, right? So if we have high social well-being, right, in our workplace, then that's going to bleed then over into our personal life, right? So if I feel fulfilled, engaged, connected, psychologically safe within my workplace, well, I'm probably going to have a good personal life as well, right? I'm probably going to be able to be more resilient when personal challenges come up, right? Because I feel safe within that environment that I spend so much time in, right? So naturally, we can't separate our social well-being at work and the social well-being within our personal life.
Yeah, for sure. Personally speaking, I always found that in getting to know my colleagues and having my colleagues get to know me as a person. That's not to say I'm oversharing personal details, like trauma dumping on them unnecessarily or anything, but just getting them to know the context of my life and me getting to know the context of theirs also allows for both of us to know each other's working style a little bit better, understand why, if certain things crop up, why they're taking leave all of a sudden, that kind of thing. And it helps a lot with, let's say, a colleague is going through something difficult in their personal life. I don't need to know the full extent of the details, but just a little bit of it, enough to go okay, I'm going to pick up the slack, and I trust that when it's due time for me to have to take some time off of work, uh, I can trust them to do the same for me as well. And it's been really transformative in just working and I guess just trusting each other and having a positive working relationship. But then apart from that, there's also the bit of having positive interactions at work. And I think there's a little bit of a gray area there because it's very subjective. Some people will view one interaction as positive, and others maybe not so much. Maybe they don't want to interact at all. So how would you define a positive interaction at work?
That's a great question. Well, first, I wish that every workplace was like the workplace that you work at, right? Feeling connected, feeling that you can open up and be your true authentic self. And I guess a way to measure that, I think that's tough, right? Because, like you said, it's very subjective. Uh, Oftentimes within society, we get, uh, when we're extroverted, we're praised for that. Versus if we are introverted, then we're looked down upon, right? So I think to really measure, positive social interactions, you would have to identify number one, what are the outcomes that are being shown in the workplace? Are individuals engaged? Do they feel that they could go to their supervisor or teammate if something is going on in their life? Do they feel that they can speak up without fear that there may be some repercussion? Right. So those are, I think, some measures looking at the environment that it is a psychologically safe and high, um, strong environment that values social well-being and the well-being of the teammates and employees.
Yeah. And when it comes to workplace interactions, what are we talking about? What are the different types of interacting in the workspace? Like, is it just small talk, or is there like other forms of interaction?
Yeah. So I mean, small talk. What did you do this weekend? How's it going? But there's also like these task focused type of conversations. Hey, we need to talk about X so that we can accomplish X goal. In my workplace, when I work with my employees, I engage in frequent check-ins as well. Hey, how are you really doing? Right? What's going on in your life? Because that's going to be important to know so I can gauge your engagement. And there's also a deeper level of conversations, right, that go beneath the surface, the more vulnerable conversations, the conversations that, take a lot of trust. So there's levels to how these interactions can show up and display within the workplace. And I think it, I think a healthy workplace has all of these components.
Yeah, I think one type of interaction I can think of is like, well, this has to be like a fun workplace for it to happen, but sometimes like my colleagues and I will send memes to each other that are like about work or like work adjacent, or maybe even something that's happening that isn't isn't necessarily work related, but is something that's going on in the world that everyone knows about, and that can help a lot with like lightening the mood a little bit, as well. But I'm curious to know, how do each of these individually kind of contribute in their own way to our social well-being at work and feeling safe?
Hmm. Yeah, so those casual type of interactions that you mentioned, I think they're definitely helpful with strengthening the rapport between individuals. And we also know that at work, right, you talk a lot about work. Okay. And doing so in an intentional way, I think also brings together individuals to have a common goal. Because we know that that is one way actually to mitigate conflict, mitigate divisiveness, is for two parties to have a common goal to work towards. And when we talk about work, right, we're under the assumption that people are engaged in what they're doing, they're interested in, their current job role, right? That's the assumption that we're making. But when those ideals are met, okay, in turn, having those conversations about a particular task or about, you know, things that are maybe coming through the pipeline, that gets others excited, that helps us come together and say, hey, we're in the same team, right? We're in the same page. And we feel better interpersonally. And also that strengthens our interpersonal interactions.
So it sounds like each of these different types of interactions really do have their own benefits and contribution to like overall social well-being. And not only that, that impacts our work performance as well. But like I mentioned at the start of the episode, there's this whole debate about whether like forced interactions should be a thing at work. Some people don't really want to do that and they feel that they're better off. You also did mention that we as a society do like just we kind of prize extroverts a lot more than introverts, right? We reward them a lot more. And I found searching on the internet and researching this topic, many employees do hate that forced interaction, forced fun, forced events, forced socializing, like virtual happy hours or like forced icebreakers. So what is your advice for ensuring that these positive interactions are authentic and productive rather than performative? What can we do to like make I guess make introverts feel a little bit more welcome, and that they did this on their own accord rather than like making them do that?
Well, first, obtain feedback. Identify what do team members want to do. Okay, co-create these type of events or opportunities, because oftentimes leaders, they come together and say, "Oh, this is a good idea, right? Let's do it," but they don't get that input and buy-in from everyone else who's actually engaged in the activity. So, yeah, what I would do is, try to co-create these events or these opportunities and ask, hey, what do you think would be helpful? And maybe it's, hey, we would just appreciate going home an hour early on Fridays, right? That would actually boost my overall well-being to do that. Okay. So remember the goal of these type of initiatives. And the goal is to boost well-being, boost cohesion, so that everyone could be more engaged to complete the goal and objective at hand. Okay. So going back to what is the ultimate goal, right? You have to create that buy-in, and you do that by getting input from others. That's one. I think two, being able to, if you do have those events, make it optional. Okay. So not mandatory. And then just on a daily or weekly basis, have opportunities for genuine connections, right? Maybe it could be before meetings. Maybe it could be if you're in person, just in the hallways, right? Try to intentionally engage in genuine connections with others in a non-formal way. And in turn, that's going to create a more authentic type of environment.
Yeah. And what are some signs that a team might be struggling to interact with each other socially?
Hmm. So we know that disengagement, right? I mean, if someone is not just verbally disengaged, but behaviorally disengaged in the conversation, that could be one red flag. Like, hey, let's watch out for that. If there's low participation in these type of initiatives or events, right? If you make something optional and nobody shows up, well, that may give you some evidence that interpersonally, right, we need to improve just the social well-being within the workplace. And I think like very passive aggressive type of communication, right? This conflict that is very subtle, we may see that to be a sign as well that something needs to be addressed. So that is what I've seen in my work.
Yeah. And what do you think are some of the best ways to initiate or start cultivating these positive interactions and making people feel welcome if someone is not participating as much as they should? What is your advice for handling all of that?
Well, first, it needs to be embedded within the culture. Okay. So this cannot be just an additive type of initiative. It needs to be embedded in everything you do, from the policies that you have to the procedures to the employee handbook, okay, to the lead policy. Okay. So systemically, we need to look at those things. And then interpersonally, it needs to be modeled as well, right? Do leaders model vulnerability? Are they opening up? Are they saying, hey, this is actually a really stressful week for me? Okay. Right there, modeling that behavior then invites others to do the same. Okay. And I think also having I think like peer mentoring or like cross team projects could be helpful as well, so that we can learn from each other, right? Because we know diverse teams who actually celebrate the diverse perspectives and values and strengths that we bring to the table, right? They actually are more innovative and they perform better than more homogenous teams. So, intentionally trying to value diversity within the workplace, yeah, could also be helpful as well.
Yeah, and on the flip side, with let's say the employees, let's say we have an introverted employee, and they do want to amp up their social well-being at work and be a bit more connected, but maybe they're having a little bit of anxiety. What is your advice for them?
Hmm. So that's definitely challenging, right? Because remember, we talked about who gets rewarded, right? There's a bias that we all may have. So, what I would not do is say, hey, Will, you need to just talk to others more. You need to be unauthentic. Okay. We don't want that. Right. So in turn, I would challenge that person to, identify, there's nothing wrong with being introverted, but what is it? What do they want? Right. What do they feel is the biggest roadblock to being engaged within the workplace? And sometimes they may recognize that isolation or that introvertedness is actually maladaptive and actually is not helping them achieve their particular goals. So if that's the case, that we identified then a pain point, and then I will work on that pain point. So going back to your question, I would identify with them, hey, where do you feel like you can improve? Where do you feel like your behavior is not serving you? And then go and focus on that to then support them.
I also wanted to talk about a different camp of people now that we've talked about introverts and leaders, managers, what they can do. There is a different camp of people that might be extroverted, but perhaps they haven't gotten the lay of the land as to like how the culture is at the workplace socially. And, perhaps they are instigating interactions that aren't quite in line with the work culture, and might end up being detrimental to their social well-being at work. So what is your advice for like getting the lay of the land as to what the social culture is like, and what is your advice for rising above that, coming back from a potentially negative interaction in the workplace?
So it's interesting you bring that up because I was thinking about one of my first workplace interactions when I was in the military. And for me, when I'm in a new environment, I just sit back, right, and observe. What are the norms here, right? What is the culture like? Maybe people tell jokes a lot. Maybe they're more serious, right? I fill out the environment. And I recognize one individual, they just didn't get the memo, right? Whatever their culture was, if it was very serious, they would come in and they would be telling these inappropriate jokes. They would be loud, obnoxious, right? And they would then disrupt, that status quo. So it's interesting, right? Because you never want to call that person out, right? Because they're just being their true, authentic self. But sometimes you recognize within others, hey, this person is rubbing us the wrong way. So I know for me, I focus on what I can control, right? When I'm in a new environment, I do exactly what I just mentioned, right? I identify, hey, what are the norms here, right? Who's in charge? How do we report? What happens if we have an issue? Okay. What are the values that everyone has, right? And then I then adapt as needed. But when we're on the other side and we may notice that there's a disruption, sometimes it may be out of our control, but sometimes, it's just creating that room for vulnerability, as we build trust with that individual so that we can provide them feedback, right? I was like, hey, that joke you said, that was kind of inappropriate, right? Let's let's talk about that. That may be challenging to do if I have no relationship. So I will go back and focus on relationship first, right? Because once you have that relationship, that true, authentic connection, in turn, everyone's social well being is going to be improved. You're going to be able to be more comfortable providing feedback. And in turn, that's just going to improve team dynamics.
Yeah, I'm curious to know what are some examples of like habits or behaviors or interactions that people might new people might instigate that would rub people the wrong way. And this is obviously very obviously subjective, but just to get an idea of what to look out for and be aware of.
Hmm. One thing I constantly see is someone coming into a new environment and trying to take power and control very early. So it may be the role that they're in, right? Maybe they're coming into a leadership role. And they automatically say, hey, we're going to change all these things. But they didn't even take the time to actually understand what's going on. They didn't take the time to learn the environment first. So that is a significant barrier in turn that may impact the well-being within the environment, right? So that's what I've seen is those who may come in new and try to establish that power control a little too early on without understanding the status quo and the norms.
Yeah, that's a really good example. And on the other hand, for people who are already working together and have overall pretty good positive interactions at work, um, there can be a little bit of a blur line as to where the closeness begins and ends. Is it just work? We hang out outside of work as well, and we're getting like really, really close. What's the sweet spot of that workplace closeness? Can there ever be like issues that arise from being too connected or too close, either in and outside of work?
Sure. So the first thing that comes to mind for me is you have to think about ethically, right? If there's different power differentials within the workplace, you have to be very careful about that, right? Because let's say, a CEO is spending a lot of time with a junior level employee, right? That's great. They may, go to a restaurant, get to know each other, things like that. But if boundaries are crossed, then in turn, that could be an ethical issue, right? Because it's going to be hard for that junior individual to give that CEO feedback or maybe report if there's some inappropriate behavior, right? Because this person controls their paycheck, this person controls, their promotion, et cetera. So you have to recognize when are those lines blurry. Okay. Again, very subjective sometimes, but other times very obvious, right? Any inappropriate behavior, you know, um, extra relations, et cetera. So just being mindful about the ethics there and also that power differential and how that comes to play.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing all of that. I think now would be a great time to go into our break segment. Today we're doing guilty pleasures, and this is where I'll be admitting to a guilty pleasure of mine that's related to the topic, which is positive interactions at work. And Ryan here is also welcome to share theirs. And then we'll be commenting on each other's guilty pleasures, sharing advice for anyone who might be experiencing something similar. So I'm going to go first. My guilty pleasure is I actually love work icebreakers and company events. I think there's been a lot of criticism, especially in the younger generations, about forced interactions at work. And I think that is very, very valid, whether it's like weekly work icebreakers or company events. Sometimes you don't want to have to do that. You want to keep your social life and work life separate. And I agree that sometimes it can feel really insincere. Um, and there are real dangers for sure that can evolve from them without any clear boundaries. But I really do enjoy participating in them. I mean, it's paid time where we get to talk about our lives outside of work. And that can not only be a breath of fresh air, but it can also, like I said at the start of the episode, it can help us to contextualize behaviors and attitudes of our coworkers and understand each other's working style, communication style a little bit better as well. And especially since the pandemic, I feel like the team building aspect of work has just been lost on so many of us. Like we think we like clock like just clock in, do the work, that's it. Don't interact unnecessarily and clock out. Um, And I think that on the other hand, it might also be that most of the forced workplace activities aren't necessarily interest based. So they're more just like, let's small talk. Let's small talk again. Let's answer these like 150 questions that are taken from a blog online that aren't interesting to anybody and don't apply to anybody's work life, like personal life at all. And so it's just like completely out of context. So anyway, regardless, all this to say that I do. I'm probably one of the few who loves the social time with coworkers and employees. But I think there's definitely like an overhaul that needs to be done with the forced interactions, and making it a little bit more interest based. So, what are your thoughts, and what's your guilty pleasure?
Yeah. So before I talk about my guilty pleasure, I'm curious, has there ever been an event that you went to that, was the most fun you ever had, like something that really stands out? And I'm curious what that was.
Oh, um, there's nothing in particular that really stands out, but so just for context, a few of our like my immediate team members have left. So I'm thinking about this from the perspective of like in the past when I had like the whole 9 yards of the team, and everybody was around, and it's just unexplainable. I think everyone just had a good chemistry with each other, and we all just enjoyed socializing. And I think this is one of the first times in my life where I've had a team like that. Like previously, you know, I've worked in teams where we go for the like monthly lunch, or the like just every time there's a major event kind of team lunch. But apart from that, we work separately. Um, and it's been all right. Like it's been okay in getting to know my colleagues better. But like I think with this team that I've worked with, it's just made work a lot more lively and a lot more vibrant, and feel just much safer.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah. So, what's your guilty pleasure?
So when thinking about this, I would say now I go back and look at my past work week. And at times it can be very stressful. Again, I run a consulting company. We work with organizations across the globe. There are some challenging weeks, there's some great weeks. But there's a lot of fires that, I have to put out, as a CEO. And sometimes, I just want to distract myself and get away from that world. So what I like to do, especially in my break time, if I'm eating lunch or if I'm just taking a 15-minute break during the day, I like scrolling on my phone. I go to Instagram and I watch like reality TV show clips. And that's like my guilty pleasure because the reality TV show, the things that they're arguing about, the things that problems in their life, are so minimal, that it's very funny to me, right? And it's comedy, right? So that gives me a good laugh. It gives me a way to just detach, from the stressful work environment and just focus on something totally different, and in turn, I'm able to put my phone down, get back to work and be in a better mood because I saw something funny, on my phone. So that's something that I really like to do on a daily basis. And I'm careful not to do it too much. So it'd be a distraction. But it just helps me sometimes to just reboot and then refocus on what I was doing.
Oh no, 100%. I used to do that as well. What kind of reality shows are you into?
So for some reason, I cannot stop watching Keeping Up with the Kardashians. I don't know
Oh my
why. They're like
gosh,
on
yes.
season like 1,000. But yeah, there are issues that they complain about. There was one episode in which she was going to be late to a party, and their private jet didn't have time to refuel, so they were like stressing out about that. It was a big deal, and it was just funny to me because that was their main concern that they had in life. So
Yeah, I do love keeping up with the Kardashians as well, which is now just the Kardashians, if I'm not wrong. But yeah, I love binge watching that as well. It is so entertaining. The production value has gone up so much in the latest reboot. Yeah, I think it's so funny, but my partner makes fun of me all the time for doing it because I'm like watching it and like for some reason, like I don't know why, but he just never thought that I'd be a reality series kind of person. And I think a lot of people don't really like think, oh, you're a reality series kind of person until you find out that you are. But it's really genuinely entertaining. And that really goes to show like it's okay to, to on your break, watch a show, watch a movie. If you well, you can't really watch a movie during your break time unless it's 2.5 hours. But screen time isn't all that bad as long as it's in
It
moderation.
contained. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. So thank you for sharing that. I think a lot of people probably feel pretty bad about watching a show during their break time. I know sometimes I do that. So I appreciate you sharing that guilty pleasure with us. Now let's move on to the practices and habits segment. This is where we talk about the more practical day-to-day application of what you shared with us. So, for starters, what is a habit that you would recommend employees practicing to improve their social well being in the workplace?
One thing that comes to mind is begin to ask deep questions. We frequently go to work on a Monday. How's your weekend? It was good. Walk away. Begin to ask deep questions. What is one thing that you enjoyed the most about this weekend? That's a deep question. What's one thing that you're looking forward to this week? Right? That's a deep question. So, engaging in deep questioning can in turn help us go beneath the surface, strengthen our rapport and camaraderie, and boost vulnerability. So, I would challenge the audience to practice that, and
Yeah.
you'll notice those stronger connections.
I like that a lot. If I could add to that, I think it's also like asking something specific. So,
Yeah.
like basically what you mentioned, like, instead of asking, how's your weekend? What did you do? Just be like, what's a highlight, of your weekend? What is something you struggled with this weekend? What exactly are you looking forward to? Anything like that. And that can be transformative in how you get your answers or how someone responds to you, right? But from what you've seen as a psychologist, what are some of the most common challenges or struggles that people face when they do try to like start practicing that habit of asking something more specific or something a little bit deeper? Yeah, do share.
I mean, resistance is one thing that frequently comes up, right? Like, oh, why are you asking this question? You're getting too personal now. So it may be challenging for others to be vulnerable because they may just look at work as work. They go in, they do what they need to do, and then they leave. So some may not value that social well being piece within the workplace. So that may be a barrier that may arise. And then also, when trust is not built, it makes sense why people won't open up and be vulnerable. Because what are you going to do with that information, right? If I said I had a hard weekend, I'm struggling, I feel kind of depressed, will you put that against me now in the future? Would that impact promotion, etc.? Right. So the safety piece has to be built into the culture so that you can get to implementing some of these strategies.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. How often would you recommend doing this practice of like asking something more specific or asking something deeper? Do you think like doing it every 2 hours, for example, is going a bit too far?
I mean, personally, I just like to do it a couple of times a week, especially if I haven't seen someone in a while or it's a long weekend. And it's typically with someone that I already have some type of relationship with, So definitely, we all start out by asking those superficial, surface level questions. But then there's a point in which, hey, the only way we're going to build this relationship is to go a little bit underneath the surface, right? So when you notice that you're at that point of that relationship, then it's time to try to go a little bit deeper so it can be strengthened.
Yeah. And are there any habits or practices that you recommend employees doing for their social well-being at work, but outside of work, like maybe reflecting on their day or like thinking, I don't know, like preparing a few questions in advance so they don't forget it when they come to work?
Hmm. Yeah, so let's go back to the definition, right, of social well-being. So feeling connected, feeling psychologically safe, right, within the workplace so that you can thrive. That's the way, I look at it, how I define it. So it could be, yeah, interpersonally engaging with someone else, but also how do I feel just more connected in general with my workplace? And one way that I can do that is actually take an interpersonal perspective and say, hey, what is motivating me to continue to go here? Yes, I need a paycheck. Yes, I may be interested in it, but what's the big common goal that I share with my teammates? And maybe that common goal is, hey, we are all on the same page because we want to come together and improve an organization's performance. Okay. And that's something we're really passionate about, helping teams be able to thrive. Right. So then me just reflecting on that connection is going to help me feel closer with my teammates because I recognize now, even though we have a lot of differences and different perspectives, right? We all have this common goal, and that brings me closer to them. So that is just one way that you can just engage in some reflection to boost social well-being
Yeah,
without
thank
actually
you.
interacting with someone else.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's such valuable information. I appreciate everything that you've shared with us today. And I've learned a lot from you. So I think now will be a great time to go into the open mic segment. And this will be your chance to talk about anything that you're passionate about. And it doesn't have to be related to the topic at all. So the floor's entirely yours, Ryan. Take it away.
So I am just very passionate about training the next generation of leaders. As a young professional myself, an early career psychologist, I look back and see, how did I get to this point? It was because of mentors, if it was because of role models, right, that helped me recognize, hey, there is no limit to how far you can go and what you can achieve. So in my company, I actually started a fellowship and internship program that trains the next generation of leaders. So I would encourage everyone who is saying, hey, I really want to, make an impact and mark in this world, right? And maybe I want to learn more about how do I engage in consulting or coaching, right? Or maybe I want to get mentorship. Feel free to, reach out, right? Because I think seeking mentorship is the most important thing that you can do to strengthen the trajectory, of your career, right? Recognize that you're not alone. And that this actually goes into social well-being unintentionally, right? Because again, we are social beings, right? And whatever goal we're trying to achieve, whether it's start a business, whether it's, hey, we want to thrive in whatever profession or whatever industry that we're in, right? We have to lean on others, right? We have to reach out to others to pick their brain, to learn from them. And sometimes that may be uncomfortable, especially for introverts, right? But I challenge everyone to try to find this one mentor, right? Or maybe you already have one, right? And try to continue to intentionally seek that support. Because when you recognize that you're stronger when you partner with others, right, then you're going to be unstoppable. So this is a team sport when we look at success, okay? And whether it's reaching out to me, maybe I could connect you with someone else. Maybe it's reaching out to someone in your network. Whatever part of the world that you're in, we're going to all benefit, recognizing that we don't have to do this alone.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing all of that with us, Ryan. If our listeners want to find out more about you and what you do, where can they go?
So you can visit my website, www.rcwarnerconsulting.com. You can also Google my name, Dr. Ryan C. Warner. Connect with me on LinkedIn and reach out that way as well. And say that you heard me in this podcast. It'd be great to connect, again, in whatever part of the world that you're in. And in turn, we can thrive together.
Amazing. We'll leave the details in the show notes. So thank you everyone for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode.
You have been listening to Doing Well, the Wellbeing Science Insights Podcast, produced by the Wellbeing Science Labs, a division of LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. More episodes are available from 10 life management perspectives and can be found by searching LMSL on Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, and other podcasting apps available on your devices. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, share, and subscribe to our channel so that other people can find it and we can continue to provide quality content. More of our work can be found on our website, we.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Lungo. Thanks for tuning in.